you're anything like me, you have a list of fall garden items that you have to do for cleanup, but you are maybe lacking some motivation doing them because let's face it, not all of them are glamorous, some of them are kind of mundane, but they still have to get done. So I thought I would take you along with me today as I go in my garden and I knock some of these items off of my list, and that way you can have some fall garden cleanup motivation. Welcome to True Freedom Permaculture, where I show you all the tips and tricks you need to have a green thumb, even if you weren't born with one. Let's go ahead and get started. This would not be a fall cleanup video without some dead leaves, of course. So this is my Zone 1 Easy Access Herb Garden on my back deck, and the grape leaves have fallen now, and they're still going to continue to fall, and just every so often I have to go out there and just I either chuck them off my balcony because they make for a great mulch layer for my garden below, or I crumble them by hand and I actually sprinkle them onto the pots of herbs because, again, it creates a really nice mulch layer for them. So that is what I did. It was a beautiful day, so I didn't mind being outside. Something else I do is I just kind of take note of my herbs. So you can see the mint is kind of starting to reel itself in, getting ready for the winter. I'm probably going to cut that back soon. And then also I've got my sage and my rosemary. I want to make sure I have those for fall and winter cooking. The next thing that I needed to do was to take care of my tomato cages. So because this year I haven't done an extensive garden, if you've seen some of my other videos, you'll know that I scaled back this year because I have the baby and I knew that I wouldn't be able to devote as much time to gardening as usual. So because of that, there is overall less garden maintenance that I have to do, meaning less tomato cages I have to pull out. But I did have some volunteer tomato plants, and so I had put those down and I got a few tomatoes off of them, but then we're doing some renovations at the house, and so I had to take the deer fence down, so the deer have come in and they have eaten most of the tomato plants, and I didn't prep the tomato cages as I normally would. Normally I would wrap some sort of netting around, especially when the plants are first starting, and I would have gotten them started earlier in the season, but I didn't have time for that this year. So it was really just a matter of pulling up these few tomato cages, and then what I did is I trimmed the tomato plants down. So instead of pulling the entire plant up, if anyone's ever done that, you will see that tomatoes have a very kind of hairy and extensive root system. And so instead of that, I just trim them down to ground level, and that way the roots will die off and it will then aerate the soil, because where the roots once were, obviously those will die and kind of shrivel up, and your soil will be hopefully nice and loamier than usual. And I tend to have clay soil, so this is especially beneficial for where I live. One of the medicinal herbs I wanted to grow this year was wild bergamot. And as you can see, we've had very rainy, very humid conditions, and it's really just encouraged the growth and spread of powdery mildew all over these plants. However, there were several leaves where they haven't been touched by the powdery mildew, so I was like, I've got to get out there and start picking them so I can use them. So that is what I did, and I'm going to dry them and put them in my medicine cabinet. So it's known for its antiseptic properties, for those of you that are not familiar with the benefits of wild bergamot. Also, it can be used topically to treat skin rashes or wounds, and then it can also alleviate any premenstrual symptoms that you're having. While perhaps not directly related to the garden, it was a beautiful day with a lot of sun, and so it was a good day for me to clean our window screens. I am not in the habit of doing this. This is actually the first year I've done it, but we got new window screens and they were already out because we were having some painting done on our home. And so I thought it would be an opportune time to take these suckers and hose them down while I still had the garden hose out. And I just wanted to give them a good scrub, because if they collect a lot of dirt, if they do, you know that they do, they collect a lot of dirt and pollen. So for those of you with allergies, this could be something that you could try once a year and see if it helps you with your allergy symptoms. So I just give it a hose down, scrubbed it with some soap, and then rinsed them again, and I let them dry out in the sunshine. I recently harvested a lot of my comfrey, but as I was walking through the garden, I noticed that it had already started to grow back, and I was surprised at how quickly it grew back and how big some of the leaves were. So I decided to take some more because comfrey is an herb that I use quite a bit. So I went ahead and I took some of the larger, nicer looking leaves, and I am going to dry those and keep them in my medicine cabinet. Now it's time for a snack break, and these gorgeous red berries just kind of glittering in the sun caught my eye, and they were my goji berries. So these, now I picked these before, and they always to me have a taste of bell pepper. Let me know if any of you have experienced that as well, but I will say that picking them this time of year, so we are talking late October, the berries I feel like are at their peak sweetness and they have less of that bell pepper taste. Some of you might like it, some people might not enjoy that so much, but I do think that these are the best they have ever tasted. So it was a real treat to stop and enjoy these in the middle of my chores. Even though I didn't plant as many vegetables as I normally would this year, thereby depleting the soil of specific nutrients, I still wanted to get in some cover crop. And even though we're in late October, I still think I have time. So my first step was to take the existing plants that were growing, and I actually started with some shears at first, but then I realized it was way easier and way faster to just use my bare hands, two of the best tools you could possibly have, I swear, and just went along and I pulled them up and they just kind of came up at the soil line, and I just left them in place because it will just add to the soil. And then I went ahead and I sprinkled some buckwheat and some clover over my garden beds, and this way this will add yet another layer, and it will just continue to build and build and build, and the soil will get richer and richer, thereby producing better crops in future years. The next task on my list was trimming back my hop vines, and it's good to do this after they stop growing in the fall. As you can see by the brownness of the flowers, they are past their prime and they are just ready to be trimmed back. And I do know the value of the hop flowers. Some of you are probably seeing this and are like, why did she leave so many flowers? So I did pull some from a vine that was located in a different part of my garden, but as I already mentioned, this year we had some painting done. So there was a lot of dust from the sanding when they were doing the prep work to the painting, and these cones are very sticky if you've ever felt them before. They're actually tacky when you press down on them, and so because of that, a lot of the dust from the sanding stuck to them, and that's not something that I want to ingest. I use these a lot in my teas, and it's not something that I want to infuse into my tea for sure. So this vine I just am using for decorative purposes. So I am going to use these beautiful hop flowers. They're not going to go to waste completely, but I'm not going to ingest them internally in any way. But I still need to trim this down. So that is what I did, and I will show you what I did with the hop flowers. Okay, enter the hops flowers. So a neighbor suggested this to me a couple years ago because at that point I had so many hops flowers I didn't know what to do with them, and she was like, well, why don't you use them for decorations? And I was like, that's a great idea. So I keep the same base of the wreath every year, and then I just kind of add a little zhuzh to it, and I just, throw in things that are growing near me. So this year you can see there's a few, like, I think corn husks from the prior year. I like it, so I'm leaving it, and maybe some leaves, but I'm going to decorate the rest of the wreath with the hops flowers because I had so many from that one vine this year. So that is what I'm doing now. Here's a photo of the completed wreath, and I was so happy with how it turned out, and the beauty's just going to continue to evolve as the flowers turn brown and crispy. Well, I hope this video gave you the motivation that you need to get out there and tackle your list of fall cleanup chores. I will see you all again soon.